One of them wanted to be the security guy. He claimed he was a security guy.
Welcome to another Black Sox version of Security Guy Radio with my very special guest today, Miss Susan Glowacki. Welcome.
Hi, Chuck. Thank
Sue
you.
is an expert in many things. One of them happens to be security in a, should we call it a hospitality
Yes,
sense?
that would be absolutely accurate.
Without disclosing any more information.
Please, thank you.
And Mr. Paul No-Show Bristow is not here again today because he's on a very special assignment, as he usually is when he's not here.
And I can't do his accent. Sorry.
But, well, Brian, you can do his accent. Go ahead, Brian. Let's hear it.
Paul Tallyho Bristow.
Very good. Excellent. Excellent. Well, have you seen this alert from CTSSA? This fake emergency pranks on the rise in 2014?
I have.
You have. What a coincidence you have seen that.
It's right here.
Well, yes, it is. So this is talking about a prank where unknown suspects telephone a target business. In some cases, they ask the employee or on-duty managers to deceive customers or guests. The suspect claims to be some authority and related to an emergency or system. And then the caller claims there's an emergency and gets the people inside the business, usually hospitality, I would say, right?
Yes.
To do something. And this is something that's on the rise. And they get them to turn on the sprinklers in the building or break out windows, activate fire alarms, let's just say that. I think that's all, folks. Break off sprinkler heads and shut down. I mean, this is serious. I mean, it can be damages up to $70,000.
Right.
Have you had something like that happen in your area?
I don't believe we have.
And when she says we, she means nothing associated with anything in particular.
That's correct.
That's right.
I sort of related it to swatting, but
What's swatting?
Swatting is when somebody calls the police to come out to, say, a celebrity's residence.
Oh,
and
that type
says
of swatting. Yes,
Right. But a security expert just told me that this is much more serious.
I wonder what are they trying to get out of it?
This costs a lot more money.
Yeah, they're just trying to cause damage.
Yes,
or?
they're just people who don't have enough to do.
So it's a hotel version of swatting.
Yes.
Very interesting. And this apparently is on the rise. One hotel suffered $70,000 in damage. Another one had the front door broken out. Fake gas leak was the prank and caused $4,000 in damage. I think this happened in Phoenix.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. And, I travel a lot, and you've traveled before. And there's just so many ways that you become a victim when you travel. Because people can spot you a mile away, and that's why it's a Black Sox version. Because if you're walking around in your khaki cargo pants with black socks and you're a button-down shirt, you're a tourist.
Camera.
Yeah, you sound like a sore thumb. You got to try and blend in. So it's just, again, it's uncanny how there's so many coincidences in our radio business. We just happen to be talking about this subject. Mm-hmm. And as I look in the studio, we happen to have an expert on travel security.
Yes, we do.
Just remarkable. Would you
Yes,
like to
we
introduce
do.
him?
I would love to.
And you know him.
I do know him.
Yes.
Do I have to call you by your real name?
Yes, I think you do. I think you have to say.
This is David Wiggins.
Or Wiki, as we call him in the business.
That's what I wanted
right.
to call him.
I've been called worse.
Dave is a 27-year veteran of California law enforcement. Do you care to say what PD? No, he shook his head no in the negative there, okay. Who retired as a senior member of the Anaheim's tourist-oriented policing team. And you're the president of the California Tourism Safety and Security Association, who put out this bulletin we just read about.
Correct.
Tell me about your background. How'd you get into all this? You're an ex-cop, and I'm an ex-cop on radio. You're an ex-cop in this. It's interesting how we get into things like this. How did you do it?
Well, good evening, Chuck and Sue. Chuck, you and I have a common background as Mouseketeers, and I've sort of got into this as a Mouseketeer, worked for Disney Security during college. And I've been told that the Mouseketeers and the Marines have something in common. You can take the man out of the mouse house, but you never quite get the Mouseketeer out of the man. And when I transitioned into law enforcement, I think I took, without realizing it, a lot of that Disney service orientation, a lot of that Mouseketeer world-class guest service orientation.
Oh, they're the best at it. No
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Disney really is. If you think about all the theme parks around the world that Disney operates, tens of thousands of guests each and every day. And they deliver world-class service. You feel safe and secure when you go in. And the expectations of the guests are pretty high going into Disney.
Right, right.
And they manage all that really well. So I took that background into law enforcement, and I remember as a rookie cop really being kind of incensed that there were local crooks who were deliberately targeting our guests, who were deliberately targeting our tourists, and developed a real passion for issues of visitor safety and security.
Huh. And how'd you start the organization?
Well, the statewide association kind of grew out of the successes that we had with the Anaheim Orange County Crime Alert Network, which is a local partnership between law enforcement and security professionals and the local attraction operators and hoteliers and the Anaheim Orange County Visitor and Convention Bureau. Very successful, been around for years, over 25 years in fact. And a bunch of us got together and we're trying to export those successes on more of a statewide basis, both the networking, the crime exchange information, but also the training that goes on. CAN meetings are held monthly, and there's kind of an abbreviated monthly training program that goes on. The thought was, how about if we did this on a statewide basis, exchanged crime and wanted suspect information on a statewide basis, and then conducted kind of a grander annual training conference. We've been doing it 15 years now, and it has grown into the largest training conference of its kind.
Really?
Yes.
More so than ATAP, which is the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals.
A little different than ATAP. We're really focused just on crime. So we don't focus so much, for example, on TSA type issues. It's really visitor venue security and crimes against tourists.
Oh, interesting. Okay, very specific.
Very specific.
Okay, but very needed. I mean, you know. Now, it's California only, but do you expand into other states? Or do you partner with a similar organization in Tennessee or something? Or
Absolutely.
Six Flags place in Chicago or something?
Right. We've got over 900 members in-state and about 100 or so out-of-state, and network really tightly with other tourism destinations around the country. Las Vegas, for example, Honolulu, New York, Orlando. We all have members from those areas as well.
How about student tours? You ever work with student tour groups?
A little bit. We've had some interns and some folks from the local college programs that will go and teach at. We do a lot of training programs and seminars, and just like membership, most of the training that we put on is free of charge.
I got to turn you on to those guys. When I was with my company that shall go unnamed forever, I can never say their name out loud. They were one of the big people in that space in the country. Smithsonian Tours is probably the largest student tour organization. And, my kids in high school going to Washington, D.C., they book it through Smithsonian, they put all the stuff together, then you have to send the kids off with a chaperone. But they would send a guard to stay on the floor in the hotel. Oh. And the hotel guard had to work with our guard to make sure the kids were not goofing around, running around. And a very sad story, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, you probably heard in the paper, there was a girl in Long Beach at a student tour, and she drowned in the jacuzzi at 6 o'clock in the morning, 16-year-old, because they didn't have a security program. They just winged it. Nobody watched the kids and kept them inside. So there's a lot of things that people assume when they're traveling are just the same as you're standing on your own block, and you're completely a target. Mm-hmm. So I've seen an organization before, and I was very glad we could get you on the show because I think this is probably an underreported organization. That's what I think, because I think so many people are affected by this. I mean, if you're just taking a little day trip down to Carlsbad, you got to think about this kind of stuff.
It's true.
Even Legoland is fraught with peril. You step on one of those pieces, and man, you got a problem.
And they're big pieces.
You got a big down there. It could really hurt. All right, so you got a conference coming up. We're going to touch on that, and we're going to get into some really specific crimes. So the 15th annual conference is coming up when?
Thursday, September 18th. We're going to be in Costa Mesa this year.
Oh, nice place. Nice. And that's one-day conference?
It's an all-day, one-day training conference,
okay.
Yes.
And is there a price people pay to get into that?
It's open to qualified working professionals only. It's $199 to register, and that includes a full day of training, a hosted luncheon, a keynote address, a hosted cocktail reception, and our 15th annual Tools and Technology Expo.
So we have about 5,000 listeners now, and if anybody wants to join, who are we going to call to or an email? Who can they send an email to?
Membership is free of charge, but it is
okay.
open only to qualified working professionals.
So you have to be in that industry or have worked or
law
consult.
enforcement, tourism, security professional, anything.
Venue, security.
Anything like
All
that,
right,
yeah. But if you go to tourismsecurity.com and email request@tourismsecurity.com with all of your identifying information. So we need your name, your title, address, telephone, fax, email, the name of your firstborn. I'm kidding. But we do need complete identifying information. Then you're included in all of our member alerts, and you have access to all of the stuff that we put out.
All right. So like some of these other organizations I belong to, like ATAP, or there's that Railroad Chiefs Association, and they're volunteer organizations. How do you keep something like this going? What are the volunteer efforts that need to happen in order for this organization to be successful?
It's all volunteer, and it has been from the beginning. There's never been any money behind this. Membership is free of charge.
That's unusual because a lot of places charge a membership fee.
Yeah, most all the training that we do is either no cost or low cost as well. I've really been blessed. I've got a great bunch of colleagues that I've worked with over the years. They're all working professionals, directors of security of hotels and amusement parks, law enforcement officers, tourism folks. Great partnership with the Anaheim Orange County Visitor and Convention Bureau. Ann Gallagher, who just retired as the vice president from the Bureau, was one of the founding advisory board members. So really diverse group, but they all donate not just their time and their energies, but really their expertise.
Right.
Because they're working in the field, they set aside some of those competitive differences in recognition of this fact. We all share, even if you're a competing hotel or a competing tourism destination, we all share a common competitor, and that's the career criminals who prey on tourists and tourism venues. So everyone comes together towards that greater good.
Well, how many members do you have?
We got over 900 within California and 100 or so outside of the state.
And then give me some backgrounds. I mean, we know the general idea that you have, let's say hotel, theme park, venue people. Give me the general sense of some of these experts that, present information. In other words, if you're law enforcement and you happen to work in Anaheim, you would have some kind of expertise because of what's down there. But if you don't work in Anaheim and you don't have the giant theme park and you work, the Fresno Cow Palace, are you still a member and can you contribute,
Absolutely. And the Cow Palace is a fine example. But you're right. It is very much a niche area of law enforcement and security. If you don't have a tourism attraction in your jurisdiction, if you don't have a large hospitality community or something, these issues probably don't pertain to you. But, tourism is a big, big industry all over the world. It's one of the few industries where people come and just, give you their money, hand over fist. If we could get them to write the check and not come at all, that'd be the next best thing. But until that happens, it's a big economic engine, especially for a state like California. And tourism, much more so than most industries, is very sensitive to concerns over safety and security.
Well, because you're not going to come to Los Angeles if you think people are getting stabbed at Hollywood Island.
Exactly.
Which they are, by the way.
I mean, travel itself
is
very discretionary.
Yeah.
You can go or you can not go at all, or you can choose to go to Lebanon or you can go to Long Beach. And in case after case where something bad has happened, where there's been a crime trend or a negative incident or a lot of media coverage, we have seen the economic impact on concerns over safety and security. That is the underlying theme of the association, and one of our probably our most popular training presentations over the years has been media relations and crisis communications for tourism venues. If you fail to prevent the incident, how do we deal with the media afterwards?
What do you recommend for that? See, I'm of course I'm on radio, so I have to talk, because if I didn't, I wouldn't have a show, and I tend to speak too much. I've always thought honesty is the best policy in these issues. I mean, you try to look like you're hedging and editing and people think you're lying, you're done.
Absolutely.
But you can't also say, hey, we screwed up and didn't repair the roller coaster. Sorry about that. I mean,
the news cycle is 24/7 today, and social media is a bigger component of it than ever before. The era of no comment in the wake of some negative incident
gone, right?
is just gone.
It's gone, right.
So not only do you have to get out in front of it, but there are certain methodologies you can use with the media where you're still expressing a genuine humanity, which I think is missing in some of the really historic and impactful incidents. Some that have just come out in the news here in California in the past couple of weeks. But also where you're saying things that are safe, that are genuine. For example, to say that your prayers and thoughts are with the victim and the family right now, that you are committed to the safety and security of your clients, your customers, your guests, your visitors, that you are thoroughly investigating the incident to do everything that possible that it doesn't happen again. Certain things that may sound trite, but they're a lot more impactful with the media than no comment.
Here's what I think happens. Let's go to Dodger Stadium. Not picking on Dodger Stadium. When I worked for Fox, I think they owned it for one time. It's a great organization. I've never thought they had, the best parking lot security. Lots of people inside. I mean, there's jackets everywhere, right? And, if you're chasing a foul ball, I don't think that's a function of security. But do you think they blew that one as far as a PR point of view or something? Well, I just felt we weren't getting enough information out of it. And, there's bringing in experts and blah, blah, blah. And the bottom line was, you should have had the parking lot more lit and people should have been out there,
Any case like that, and that one was just settled for several millions of dollars, illustrate a couple of principles. First, that security today is simply a cost of doing business.
It's absolute cost.
If you're not paying to do it right to begin with, you're going to wind up paying a plaintiff's lawyer later on. Second, that any significant crime trend or incident on your property really demands some sort of appropriate response. One of the basic tenets of premise liability is that of foreseeable preventability.
That's right.
That means if you've had any prior incidents or you've got any crime trend, you really have to take appropriate reaction and response, or you're really going to wind up paying for it later on.
Yeah, if it's foreseeable and you don't do something about it.
But beyond all that, I think just what you said, many observers on this case in particular out of the stadium feel that the real failure here was that of media relations and crisis communications.
Hold that thought. Is that the music, Brian? Our fave music? All right, we'll be back in a minute on Security Guy Radio. Follow us on securityguyradio.com and YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and now Instagram. Back in a minute. Welcome back to Security Guy Radio. That's securityguyradio.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and now Instagram. Brian, I'm forgetting one again. What am I forgetting?
What'd you say?
I need a new sign.
Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter.
There's 6 of them.
Google Plus.
Google Plus. I'm sorry, Google. I apologize. Please do not shut me down. Please. We're back with our special guest, Dave Wiggins of the California Tourism Safety and Security Association, the president of said organization. And we're talking about tourism safety and security. I think I promoted this as travel safety and security, which I think is a lesser included component. Am I wrong? Am I right about that? I should have really. It is tourism. It's more specific, isn't it?
We actually do consumer presentations as well, which is generally what you call travel. Travel equates with
but
consumer
business
level.
travel and tourism is not the same thing, really.
We address business travel as well, but the bulk of what we do is industry inside stuff, and that is why the association has stayed kind of low key over the years. We're not out trying to be high profile or draw sponsorships or whatever. It's all kind of low key exchange of crime information.
So let's go back to Dodger Stadium. Is that a venue that would fall under your membership?
Absolutely. We have convention centers.
Are they
concert
part of it,
halls.
by the way?
Yeah, we have almost every single tourism venue in the state has we have at least one representative from. Every
Okay, so that's a destination. It's considered tourism because you want to see the Dodgers when you come to LA.
In a broad sense, it's called a visitor venue. Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And all the principles pertain. And we were talking about how the case illustrates foreseeable preventability and security is simply a cost of doing business these days. But a lot of observers feel that the larger failure there really reflected what we were talking about earlier, and that's the media relations and the crisis communication.
That was my feeling about it.
Some of the initial spokesmen that came out really didn't articulate, honestly, as much humanity as one would expect, given the particulars of that case. And they hadn't really been schooled. And media relations and crisis communications is simply a learned skill. It's not rocket science. You can go to a few classes and get good at it. But what we have found is if you put the chief executive in front of the cameras and he hasn't received that schooling, he's more likely than not to misstep.
Oh, yeah, and executives are terrible usually with the social media and the Twitter and the YouTube and the blah, 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 and they screw it up because it's not easy to understand the impact that has unless you really kind of get into it. I'll put something up on Facebook or YouTube and I think, well, this will be popular. Nothing. Not a blink, a like, and then I'll do something stupid, and I get 500 people saying, this is fantastic. I can't figure it out, and I do it all day long, right? So if you're not involved in it, easy to misstep. And I think the other thing that failed on that is, security folks, cops, we're not great speakers. We're people of few words usually, unless you're like us that are blabbermouths, and we're the guys they called in to talk people out of things. But for the most part, sit down, no. Clunk, going to jail, right? And Dodger Stadium, their PR stuff is about baseball, sports. They know that. They know how to talk about how many balls you hit, and I fall asleep listening to it. But you put the security guy out there to talk about something, premise liabilities, you can really fall into it. And I think that's what happens. It's kind of sad because I think it's a good organization, and I know they have a very good security department over there.
Each and every organization should select who they want the spokesman to be, but whoever that person is really needs to be well-schooled on media relations and crisis communications. And if they're not a security expert or the security director, then before they get in front of the cameras, at least partner with those experts to get the truth of the particulars of
You don't want to come across as being fake, but you have to understand what is happening.
Absolutely.
So you're going to ask something about training, sir.
Oh, I was just going to ask you if you could be a little more specific about the kind of training that the association does.
Or what might you have done for Dodger Stadium as far as a training,
Training is a
beforehand?
training is a big component of what the association does. And in addition to the annual conference that we put on, which has grown to be the largest of its kind, we do a bunch of half-day seminars. We'll put on 2 or 3 of these each year. Right now, in fact, my colleague Adam Coffern is organizing one, which I think is really going to be popular. It's kind of a how-to, a hands-on seminar for credit card fraud. So participants in this seminar are actually going to do themselves each of the common techniques in creating a fake credit card. They're going to learn how the crooks do it because they're going to do it themselves, and I think that should be very impactful. But past training topics have included things like narcotics abuse and recognition for employers, counterfeit currency detection, hotel security best practices, responsible beverage service. So many tourism venues include, a cocktail lounge or a bar or something. Disaster preparedness, business continuity. Travel safety for women has been a big one the past few years. We do a lot of training for convention managers and meeting planners, how to do site selections, how to select a
Now, that's a big one.
It's a big one because
Yeah.
it's big business.
LA Convention Center sounds good, and Chicago, whatever they call that place, it sounds good. But maybe, Phoenix is better because there's no crime. I mean, it just depends.
Safety and security is really important to these folks, and business travel, conventions, trade shows, conferences is huge business. As lucrative as tourism is in a broad sense, studies have shown that business travelers, particularly conventioneers, spend 3.1 times as much as leisure travelers when they're here. And that includes the cost of exhibits and whatnot. And
that's
so many
interesting.
of those travelers are on, business accounts, expense accounts and
Right.
whatnot, which lends to that. So it's a very competitive industry as well. And if we can come back to that, I'll illustrate how some of these principles are being used by tourism marketers to help pull in more business. Sue, to your other question, though, one of the big training topics the past couple of years, especially since Newtown, has been active shooter prevention and response. Big topic. The Newtown, Connecticut shooting was a real shift, I think, in outlook on people. It allowed law enforcement security professionals to say things and present training that perhaps we were reluctant to do in the past. And the association has taken a big lead in that in the past 18 months. We have partnered and have some advisory board members who are Alice Institute trained.
Sure, I know Alice very well.
My absolute favorite for really hands-on tactical approach to active shooter training. But that's not for everybody. And tourism executives are very sensitive about the perceptions. And they don't.
Well, I got news for you. They're all sensitive, right?
Absolutely.
I did a whole show. I called it PTA, which is Parent Teacher Association, Preventing Active Shooter Training, right? Or whatever my acronym was. And it was a great acronym anyway. And I said on the show, I got, 5,000 listeners. I will give free training to an organization that calls me or emails me. All you got to do, if I'm not in LA, pay for my plane ticket and hotel and a couple of good steaks, I'm there and I'll do it. I did not get one call.
Wow.
And I get calls for other things. I have 5,000 listeners, so I know people are paying attention.
Yep.
And I could not get my head around why people wouldn't call. Now, to your point, they're reluctant. Oh, it doesn't look good to give that training. No, it doesn't look good to have dead bodies on your
Exactly.
lobby.
Yeah.
So you're finding the same resistance in the travel industry for this.
Very much so.
It's weird.
To your point and to this resistance in tourism as well, there's an interesting thing going on. I was talking with a group of insurance executives up in Los Angeles last month. And, I don't speak for the insurance industry, and this is maybe a little premature to say at this point, but I can tell you that the industry is starting to look at the frequency, the foreseeability
Oh, absolutely.
of active shooters now. Sadly, they have become so common in our society that they're starting to look at insurance premium adjustments for those businesses that do provide active shooter training for their employees. So to address the sensitivity but still put on some meaningful training, the association partnered with Safety Source last year in Garden Grove. Fantastic operation. They have tons of prepackaged safety training programs, and then we'll do tailored programs on request for individual businesses. But they helped us produce a training video called Active Shooter Prevention and Response for Tourism Venues. And it's now being used by tourism businesses, hotels, convention centers, stadiums, all over the country for the non-security personnel in particular, to at least get folks who don't think along these lines normally to start thinking tactically. What will I do if? How will I respond? How will I get my associates out? How will I get our guests and customers out if an incident were to occur on my venue? Very introductory, but it's a good start.
You have to have something. I wrote a white paper on that 9 years ago, where 3 guys went to a venue. I'm not going to say what kind of venue. They went to a venue, and there were 3 guys, and they went to the place before it closed, and they bought tickets for cash, and they went and started going pop, pop, pop with the guns, dropped the guns, walked out, and that was it. The whole industry went kaplunk. It's that easy. And you're training for that sort of thing specifically. If the first responders have some kind of idea what to do, people will follow them, right? But lack of leadership and lack of response is critical. How would that sort of training be handled in, let's say, an average size hotel, like, it's a 500-room hotel? Who are the people who are going to train for that kind of thing? The management, the staff, and they're going to, when something goes down, they know what to do. Not just for themselves, though. How are they interacting with the guests?
Absolutely. You want introductory training for everybody, if nothing more than stimulate their thinking. But you got to first get them over the hump of, well, that can never happen here.
That's right, because it's going to.
Yes, it can.
And what people don't know is that in those situations, I don't want to dwell on this too long, there's other things to talk about, but it's one of my favorite subjects. A shooting happens somewhere in the world every day. You don't hear about it unless there's a big body count or it's juicy or it's kids, but how about the place in Russia, where they used, when was that, after one of our incidents, they used swords and things that weren't traditional shooting, and it happens all the time, and it's going to happen here more.
I think a lot of places, their frame of mind is, well, we'll just call the police.
Yeah, and they don't know that police won't get there.
Right, yeah. They don't realize that they are actually the first responders in that situation.
The police are cleanup.
2 years ago, Sue, we did a retrospective survey, 15 years worth of active shooter incidents in America, and the average response time for the first gun to arrive, for the first armed officer to arrive, was 12 minutes.
Yep, that's right.
It's no coincidence that the average duration of an active shooter during that same period of time was 12 minutes.
Well, actually, it's less from my statistics. I mean, I'm not going to, it's a fine line, but usually it's like, 8 minutes, and then it's 12 minutes for the cops to get there. It's all cleanup. You have to take care of yourself. Remember that show we did on this? We also brought in the history. Mm-hmm. And you've had school shootings going back to the 1700s.
Oh, that's right.
Remember that?
Yes.
It was fascinating. I couldn't believe all the data. It was like, what? Some guy got, ticked off at his teacher because the kids killed his canary, and he strangled a kid in class. Mm-hmm. And then the dad came in and shot the teacher. Back in 17-something.
Well, we have media now.
I know.
We can report that out.
Well, that's very important, training information. What are some other things that would be specific training to higher level people? Like, do you get the executives buying into this training? They may delegate the training down to their troops, but what are we training the top decision makers on?
One of the biggest themes the past few years for just that echelon, if you will, of tourism businesses has been the criticality of doing background checks.
Oh, that's interesting. On their hotel people or whatever, the park people.
Whether it's a hotel or any kind of venue, I can't tell you. I mean, we literally handled thousands of tourism crime-related investigations over the course of a 27-year career in a busy tourism city like Anaheim. The number of times that the suspects that we identified in cases had criminal backgrounds and were working at a tourism business or had been fired from another business or prosecuted and no background check had been conducted was really scary. And sometimes these become much more than just property crimes. There was a case in Phoenix just last year where a front counter employee was sexually assaulting female guests. And he was on parole as a high-risk offender, and yet
nobody checked him.
No background check had been done by either hotel.
Well, and when people say they did a background check, going online to Google is not a background check. You got to search the court, hand records. It's kind of complex. I'm very surprised to hear that. And I would think in that industry there'd be a higher appearance of background checks. But you know what? I'm this guy that has a radio show and doesn't know what I'm talking about. Nobody pays me, and that's why I'm doing this. So what the hell do I know? Back in a minute on Security Guy Radio. That's securityguyradio.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Google+, and Instagram. Mr. Brian, I got it. Back in a minute. Let me push the cough button here for you. Welcome back to Security Guy Radio. That's securityguyradio.com. Chuck Harold. My special guest, Sue Growacki of Points Unknown, a mysterious security expert appearing to talk about our travel, tourism, safety, and security through the CTSSA KTSA. KTSA, is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, it is. And I'm actually not here to talk about it. I'm here to ask questions of the real security.
Well, you had some. Sue has brilliant comments and questions during breaks, and then she's silent during the show. We have to kind of flip that paradigm so she understands it's called talk radio, not silent radio.
It has to be interrupt radio.
So come on, let's talk about something we were talking about before over the break, or this right here.
Yes.
Well,
You
go-
want me to say that?
Yes, we're
Wiggy?
cueing you
Oh,
to say
okay.
something.
You've been invited all around the country to speak and present training. Your efforts have been credited with helping change how the tourism industry views the police and security function. What was behind this transformation,
That was very well read.
Mr. Wiggins?
That was really one of the underlying impetus to get the association going.
Wait, no,
to be
that's too
honest.
big a word.
That
I can't say
Wait,
impetus.
I know what that means.
Well, my viewers, I have to be very cautious with large words. But go ahead.
it's been a big paradigm shift in Sue's time and mine
Paradigm, I know.
at
I can spell that.
tourism destinations. You know, a generation ago, when Chuck and I started in law enforcement, the prevailing mentality was you keep the security dog at bay, you keep the police function hidden.
Yeah, you didn't want to see them at any venues.
That
was a
was-
bad thing.
Absolutely. It was a bad thing. It scares our guests, was
Right.
what I used to hear over and over again. There was one hotel in town in particular, really big box, that would have a number of issues. And every single time they would call for the police, we were specifically directed to park at the rear loading dock so that nobody would see the
Yeah,
black
yeah.
and white. So this shift really started, not with the association, it really started with 9/11. That same big box on 9/12 called and said, hey, any chance you could get a black and white and just park it in front of our hotel?
Exactly,
And
right,
just
right.
leave it there.
Yeah.
That scene was played out a million times over countrywide in the wake of 9/11, and it really started the paradigm shift. And other things like, you know, natural disasters, Hurricane Katrina, and some of the fallout from that, particularly with regard to tourism and what had been a major economic engine prior to Katrina, started this thinking. So in the months and years after 9/11, the thought became, well, it's not really so scary to our police or to our guests, rather, and even if it is, we really need to have it. Well, we set out at the association to measure this. Let it not just be, you know, Wiggy's attitude or Chuck's attitude or, you know, whatever. Let's ask our guests. So the association partnered with the Anaheim Orange County Visitor and Convention Bureau, and the study was facilitated by CIC Research out of San Diego. And what we wound up doing was the longest, largest, most traveler demographically detailed survey ever conducted on the topic of visitor perceptions regarding safety and security. What we did was 2,334 face-to-face interviews at a variety of tourism venues around the state over the course of a year. And the questions were phrased both negatively and positively. We were not fishing for answers. We
Right,
really
right.
wanted to get to the heart of people's thinking. And we don't have the time to get into the whole detailed output now, a
Well,
bunch
we
of
might.
graphs and everything else. But what really became clear out of the survey was that our visitors, both business travelers and leisure travelers, are clearly making their travel decisions with safety and security in mind. People are not going to some place, as we observed earlier, that they perceive to be unsafe. And this extended all the way down, not just at the macro level for countries and destinations and whatnot, but all the way down to what cities, what attractions, what hotels they're going to stay at. People,
Neighborhoods, really.
right down
Because
to
hotels
neighborhoods.
are neighborhoods.
People were doing research, for example, to find out. We also found that in this era, guests today want to see and expect to see a positive, protective presence. They want to see police and security. We talked earlier about what a great role model is Disney in this regard. Disney has a thing called meet and greet. That's how they address a problem person. Well, that sounds really friendly, doesn't it? Meet and greet. And that's if you're a problem. If you're not a problem, there's nobody friendlier. There's nobody more outgoing than a Disney security personnel. And the police departments have a lot to learn from that. Other security professionals have a lot to learn from that. It's not just that our guests want to see and expect to see, but you can actually use your security team as a positive guest interaction, a positive perception while people are there. But more than that, what the survey underscored and what a lot of visitor and convention bureaus and sales teams around the country picked up on when the survey came out, and it was quoted all around the world. I got calls from Orlando to New York to Honolulu to Las Vegas. Hey, can we get a hard copy of this? Was that safety and security can actually be used as a sales and marketing tool. And that pointed the way for directors of security to partner with directors of sales and marketing.
Why wasn't this happening before? This is the part I don't get.
Really had nothing to do with each other. In fact, it's kind of a chronic headbutting that goes on between those two functions in many destinations. The line is the salespeople sell the dream and the cops and the security professionals have to service the nightmare. They don't really even talk to each other about who's coming and what problems are anticipated. But in the wake of the survey, really proactive security directors and sales and marketing folks started partnering with each other and realizing that, hey, we can use our good safety record. We can use the fact that we have a professional security team and our safety track record and whatnot as a sales and marketing tool, and started including police personnel, started including security personnel in things like site visits and sales calls, started getting them in front of tour operators and those key clients that drive a lot of business. And it's been very successful for those destinations and venues that have adopted that model.
Well, they're the first person you see for the organization almost always. It's either
very true.
It's either the ticket taker / cashiers is destination one, and the second one is the gate or whatever. And those people have to be upfront, and they set the tone for your organization. I really think so.
The benefit to your listenership too here, Chuck, is that so many bosses, so many executives view the security function as maybe just a black hole of money. When you're partnering with your sales or marketing team and you're helping make sales, suddenly now the security function is a positive ROI. It's more than just a necessary evil, got to do it. Now they're actually contributing to the bottom line.
Let's talk about the matrix, right? So I learned this, I don't know when was I at Fox? 96 or something. I had to justify my existence. I had to prove I was a cost center. I wasn't making Star Wars, okay? Any money that came into me was just a black hole and it cost a lot of money. And the less they could spend on me, the better. And I couldn't get anybody to understand what our function was and how it worked. So I took, the amount of our budget, which I think was $2 million, and took the number of guards we had, which was, I don't know, let's say it's 100, whatever the number was. And I started taking our calls for service, which were about, we got about 240,000 phone calls a year. When I say phone calls, that was, one incoming call generated 2 response calls on average. So that was 245,000 call volume. And then I said, what's my number one call for service? Well, guess what it was? It was opening doors. Because Susie, the creative director, who's a bubblehead, but she's a creative genius, never brings her keys because that would, inhibit her ability to create something. And we had to open the door for every morning, okay? I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that when we divided all this math up by how many doors we opened as our number one function, it cost about $1,200 a door to open up the door. So we opened the door. $1,200 to open up a door. And he said, well, that's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. Well, here's the guard. Here's our budget. Here's what they do the most. We weren't preventing crimes because, it's a closed studio. We're inside a closed building, inside a closed editing booth. We had 3 layers, right? The second I put that out, oh, my God. All of a sudden, I got every head bean counter in the studio saying, how did you come up with this? I don't understand this. This is great. And I actually got more money because then I got more money to take it and put it in the place that they needed it, which was a key box.
There you go.
Automatic key box. We put a big, giant key panel up. People came and went, bink, 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 got their key, came back and went, bink, 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 put it back. I eliminated the position by gaining some hardware, right?
Great example.
Yeah. So give me some matrix in the hotel, venue industry that you guys use to measure those kind of things, because that's how you get the return on your investment is by measuring things. What are you measuring?
Good example. The sad truth too often is, I think, in any sort of security operation, but tourism is no exception. Often the improvements, the investment is made, when the cows have already fled the barn. When you have a negative incident, when something bad has happened, that's when improvements are tend to be made. We do a lot of security assessments. We're engaged in one right now at a 5-star hotel. This one is just proactive, and I really applaud them for doing it. But most of the time when we're called in, it's because there's been a negative incident. Yeah, a bad trend or whatever. Yeah.
So are people paying for security surveys? Not through your organization. But I see that. I mean, I used to charge, $2,000 to spend a day out there and say, here's what you need to do. And once you put the paper out and put it on their desk, they should do something because now they have what?
Foreseeable preventability.
Foreseeable. This expert told you here's what's going to happen.
We talk a lot about confidentiality with clients in this regard. Everything today is discoverable. Absolutely everything today is discoverable. And even though there's NDAs and confidentiality agreements and whatnot, there's a real possibility that 3 years from now some plaintiff's lawyer is going to be subpoenaing you because they didn't act on it. So there's a lot of honest feedback that goes on verbally and then somewhat more redacted output on paper. But if you're putting it on paper and they're accepting the finished product and they don't act on it, then that monkey of liability is definitely
it's
on their
gonna
back.
happen. So you're talking at the break. Another brilliant discussion during the break.
During
when
the break,
when
yes.
the microphone was turned off.
I'm good.
You're very good
Just
off
like that.
microphone. Yes. Oh, good heavens! There's the break music. So we'll
And I-
continue our off-air discussion with our special guest Sue Kawaki. But I want you to tell that story you're talking about
Okay.
the serial rapist.
Okay.
Going around venue to venue. Remember that?
I will
We
do
got to
that.
talk about that.
Yes,
Back
I'll
in a
do
minute
that.
on Security Guy Radio. That's securityguyradio.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Google Plus, and Instagram. Welcome back to Security Guy Radio. That's securityguyradio.com. Please, please, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and Google Plus. Back with my special guest, Sue Kawaki, our secret, silent commentator here on Security Guy Radio. Now, this is your first time co-hosting,
Yes.
so I'm going to stop talking because I have a big mouth.
And I had, an hour's notice.
Okay, that's
Thanks,
fair.
Chuck.
That's fair. That's fair. Paul No-Show Bristow threw us
Yes.
for a loop, but that's okay.
It's okay. I'm glad you're gone, Paul. No offense.
Oh,
I'm having
careful.
fun.
I'm going to get hate mail now. Don't do that. All right, go ahead. Take it away.
Okay. Well, I was going to interrupt, but now I don't have to. I wanted to ask you, Dave Wiggy, typically what are the most common crimes against travelers?
Well, the classic crimes include things like hotel room burglaries, distraction thefts, car burglaries, robbery, sexual assaults, and pickpockets.
Okay,
Some
can
of
I
these-
stop you there?
Yes.
Okay. Why is pickpocketing such a big problem?
Good question. And it is a really chronic issue at tourism destinations worldwide. Pickpockets are a subset of distraction thefts. So distractions are all the things we go on vacation to go see. A parade, fireworks, a show.
Oh, they're not creating the distraction. They're already in the distraction, and they're not paying attention.
It's both. It's both, actually. No, you're right on the money. That is a contrived kind of distraction.
Yeah.
But if I am at an amusement park, for example, all of those things I mentioned are the distraction. People are not paying attention to themselves and their property because they're
Squirrel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Squirrel. Now, there are contrived distractions as well, and pickpockets sometimes engage in those, but sometimes they don't even need to. And here's why pickpocketing is such a problem for tourism venues. If Sue and I meet face-to-face in a normal social setting, about all the closer we get to each other is handshake distance.
Right.
Now, if I get closer to Sue than a handshake distance, Sue gets a little uncomfortable. If I get right up next to and start
Then I
rubbing
would
up against
probably
Sue, then Chuck
take
starts to
action.
get uncomfortable. And yet, think about it for a minute. What sort of environments are we not only okay with that, but almost expect people so close to us on all sides that they're rubbing up against us? Lines, elevators,
Yep.
public transportation, trains, buses, escalators, elevators, watching a parade or the fireworks or whatever. Well, all of those environments are very consistent with what?
Yeah.
Tourism venues.
Yeah.
So pickpockets, and we're talking about career criminals. We're talking about people who are practiced and skilled and expert, and
Just
sometimes
like in the movies, they really exist.
they really exist.
Right.
Sometimes it's almost a familial thing. They pass down the craft generation to generation. In major cities in the world, this is a lifetime profession. Rome, for example, Barcelona, two of the pickpocket capitals of the world. They rub right up against you, and because you're not really having a problem with it because it's a tourism environment, it's very compact. That's how they're able to work. And they seldom work, contrary to popular belief, solo. They're usually in large teams, 4 or 5 of them
really?
at a time. And even if you feel the pick on a train or subway, or you're waiting to get on a bus and confront the suspect immediately, they are so adept at quickly passing it off to the second, third, fourth suspect that the guy that picked you will hold up his arms and feign, disbelief. Why are you accusing me of this? Well, search me. I don't have, and sure enough, you don't.
Should you put your wallet in any particular place that makes it more safe?
Good
Or are they
question.
good at all of it?
There-
I always keep mine in my front, and I keep my hands in my pocket all the time,
Yeah,
so I'm a hard target.
Never in a backpack with a zipper on it or anything like that.
Right.
I like the front as well. If you really want to get good at these issues, I'll tell you that the world expert on distraction thefts and pickpockets is a guy named Bob Arno. very well versed, very well traveled, and in the era of the tiny digital camera, Bob and his wife Bambi travel around to tourism destinations all over the world and actually invite themselves to be victims. They set themselves up and then record these guys
Oh,
in
how
the act.
interesting. Where can we find them on the web somewhere?
They have a blog, in fact. I believe it's thiefhunter.com or
I think I've
thiefhunter.com.
seen
Or
it.
Bob Arno has spoken to the Tourism Security Conference on a couple of occasions and is always a big hit. He is absolutely mesmerizing. Tremendous presentation skills. He's also written a book, if you really want to get good at this, called Travel Advisory. Highly recommended. And you really get down to the street level of crimes against tourists at destinations all around the world. It's a real eye-opener. But to answer your question, I learned a little trick from Bob. If you can go without the wallet, just put your credit cards and your cash all together, put it a rubber band, a big thick rubber band or two, and put it in your front pocket. The rubber band keeps it all together and makes it hard for these guys to pick out.
Well, it's going to drag too. It's going to
Yeah,
drag
it would
it.
be
Absolutely.
sticky.
No, it's good.
Right.
That's good.
In some cities, like women in their purses, for example, the robberies have been much more violent. The problem got so bad for some years in Honolulu, and is no longer, to be fair to Honolulu. They aggressively addressed this. Suspects were driving by women in Waikiki. The passenger in the suspect vehicle was leaning out the window and reaching for women's,
Their
bag,
handbags.
the bag string, the
Strap.
the strap, and literally pulling the victim to the ground in order to get
Right.
the purse. That problem became pretty chronic for a while.
Interesting.
Just if I may, being that I am a woman and probably more of a victim of a possible sexual assault than a man, what about that? I mean, I know, I feel that I know how to protect myself personally in situations, such as that when we're on vacation. I would never get on an elevator with somebody by myself or anything like that. But what can women do to protect themselves?
The association has a whole training program, a 4-hour seminar that we do on travel safety for women. We've done it for a bunch of female executive groups, for the California Hotel Lodging Association, for some other organizations. But in short, a couple of things. Do your research before you go. Know before we go. We always tell people. It's really important to look at the crime rate of a city you're thinking about going to ask questions about the safety and security features of a hotel you're thinking about staying at. The further you go, the more of a problem this is. There are certain minimal expectations and standards in America, but the further afield you go, none of those standards may exist. I think the other thing that we've seen in some of the news coverage in the past couple of years, for example, coming out of India or some other countries with different cultures, is it's really important when you go on vacation or a business trip to understand, to have researched, and to respect the local customs.
Oh, it's
Chuck,
very important.
You talked earlier about dressing like a tourist. I think it's really important that when you're in Rome, euphemistically, to
Right.
do as the Romans
That's
do.
right.
Don't dress flashy. Don't dress like an American. Leave the jewelry at home. Leave anything at home that really distinguishes you as a tourist or as an American. But there are cultural differences in some countries and cultures, especially with regard to women alone, that just almost invite you to be
That's
a
a red
target.
flag if you're a woman alone in a
Absolutely.
certain country. Yeah.
And I'm not justifying those practices. I'm certainly not justifying the sexual assaults that occur, but you do see this pattern in some countries. The news coverage has been really negative for India, for example, for the past couple of years. Just one sexual assault case after the next.
Do you think, is there a higher appearance in this industry for sexual assaults than other industries?
Tourism is associated with probably more sexual assaults amongst strangers and amongst acquaintances than not, for a variety of reasons. There's a lot of shenanigans that go on at conventions and trade shows and conferences.
Oh yeah, but
there are
familiar sexual assaults.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but there are more heinous things as well. We're starting to see an uptick again, unfortunately, here in the past 18 months or so with the dosing of drinks.
Oh.
That was a deal maybe a decade ago, kind of ebbed for a while. We're starting to see that come back again. Really important for
putting
women.
5-hour energy drink in your
Yes,
they roofie you with one of those.
yeah,
so
something
you
like
actually
that.
stay awake. Yeah.
It's been so bad in some cities, for example, where women are unwittingly getting victimized by two locals and not realizing it. The guy at the bar who buys them a drink, they believe to be a tourist, as they are.
People are tag teaming a victim, like the bartender's involved?
Listen to this scenario,
all right.
because I think most of us expect that it's the suspect who's going to dose the drink, who is also a
Right.
patron. There are cases where the patron is acting like a tourist and acquaints himself with the female tourist, And it's the bartender then that doses the drink.
No.
And when this first emerged, I was honestly a little incredulous, like, well, what does the bartender get out of it? And the answer from the local cops was $20. Wow, you're kidding me. You're willing to facilitate the sexual assault of a complete stranger for $20, but that's what's going on.
No background check on that guy, probably.
No.
Well, although a background check wouldn't catch that necessarily.
No.
Yeah.
You're right.
They usually don't do them on bartenders.
Now, you were talking about the story about the guy that was going around the country to different
Yes,
venues. and
he
finally got
worked
caught.
for a company that placed him in different venues like boat shows and car shows and things. And he would go around the country, and after one sexual assault where he was discovered to be, the suspect, they were able to go back and track DNA to different places he had worked. And he had a number of sexual assaults, and he was a serial rapist.
1 minute, Mr. Bryan. Dave, give us the whole lowdown on the seminar, and again, place, date, time. Let's get it out there for you.
It's
in the show.
Thursday, September 18th. It's going to be our 15th annual Tourism Safety and Security Conference. And this is co-organized by a bunch of different agencies, not just us. Newport Beach Police Department, Garden Grove Police Department, Anaheim Police Department, the Anaheim-Orange County Visitor and Convention Bureau, California Hotel Lodging Association, a bunch of folks involved. And really pleased with the training agenda. It's always a very nuts and bolts sort of a training agenda. And this year's presentations include IT security and privacy protection, crime scene preservation, hotel security, gypsy crimes, travel safety for women, organized distraction theft rings, homeless issues at tourism venues, safety and security for meeting planners, and we're going to have our 15th annual Tools and Technology Expo, which is the latest emerging technologies for protecting tourism venues.
Excellent. I have a lot of guards that listen. If they work at a venue, are they eligible to
Absolutely.
attend? All right, so that's something you guys should attend, look into, and gain some extra knowledge, which will help you in your careers. Dave, this has been a really very, very interesting show.
Thank you,
Thank
Joe.
you very much. Glad we got together on this. Come back and finish up some more?
Sure.
Next time I want to do a whole show on crimes.
All right.
It'll be really fast because there's some really clever crimes out there.
Be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, follow us again next week on Security Guy Radio. That's securityguyradio.com. And thanks to my special guest, Sue Glowacki. Sue, you have one more chance to talk before we get off the air.
Thanks for having me. And Paul, I really do like you. I didn't mean that.
See you next week on Security Guy Radio. That's securityguyradio.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and Google+. Yes, I got it all right. Till next week. Goodbye.